Hi, Katie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back.
Perfect. So I'm with Katie Warpinski. My name is Paige Elizabeth, and we are here discussing, just life as it pertains to midlife women specifically, and how to navigate it, right?
Sure,
Um,
it's tough.
Today's a big day. Today, Pluto entered Aquarius, and it will stay there for 20 years. It dipped its toe last year for a few months and then went retrograde back into Capricorn. And now we are back into Aquarius full time. And that's a big shift. Now, a lot of people on the apps are like, oh, well, if you're a fixed sign, then blah, 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 blah. As someone whose chart is 70% cardinal, and I just survived, what, 15, 16 years of Pluto and Capricorn, it's not that simplified, right? Like the planets have to make an aspect specifically to a point on our chart for us to really feel it. Otherwise, it's more of a collective thing. It's not so much a personal thing. And so if you are an Aquarius or you are a Scorpio, you got to look to the degree because if your sun is at 22 Aquarius, it is going to be a decade before you feel that on your sun. So
Ooh,
it did enter Aquarius, but we really got to pay attention to where that those points are in our chart. So, but as for the collective, I'm happy it's an Aquarius because Pluto tends to really amplify the shadow side of a sign, and it was in Capricorn, which is the top of the chart. It represents hierarchy, it represents government, authority, corporations. It represents all of these top points of our world, of our lives. And so we've watched over the last 15 years as these institutions have become bigger and more bloated and really just revealed and their sloppiness and how they deal with things, right? As you can see with, what has happened with just banks getting too big, corporations getting too big, government getting too big. And so, and today, that wonderful decision of Biden to say, hey, yeah, you can launch missiles into Russia. That happened. And a lot of people are concerned that that'll pull us into World War III. I'm not convinced based on the fact that Pluto has gone into Cap or Aquarius that that's going to happen. I think it could really it could really deter their plans because the energy is no longer supporting that old game, right? Because um, Aquarius is the people. So we are now exchanging hands. It's no longer at the top. It's now been brought back to the bottom where the people are. And so even if there is some, like we get close, the people have the power now that Pluto has shifted signs, and that's going to become more and more obvious as time goes on. So we'll see what happens, but Aquarius is community, it's grassroots, it's technology.
hmm.
Now, I will say, because everyone's like, oh, we're going full on AI. Again, Pluto represents the shadow side of a sign. I would be really curious to see if we don't see the not the dismantling of AI, like it's gonna get bloated. It's gonna be too much. But I think what will happen is there'll be like a reconciling
Okay,
of AI because we'll see where it's not helpful, right?
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't see it just being an out of control thing. Again, Pluto really has a way of being like, oh, because Pluto's power struggle. So if we go too far with unchecked power, it gets restrained by Pluto. So
Everything has to be balanced in life, right?
yeah. So it'll be an interesting time. I'm just really glad that it's moved into Aquarius. And again, my 70% of my chart is cardinal, which means that it was directly affected by Pluto for a very long time. And I'm happy to be done with that. So And I was just looking at Katie's chart, and Katie has no earth in her chart. She doesn't have any prominent um earth in her chart. So it's just interesting. I was like, what was being aspected in your chart? When was the last time? And I was like, oh, we don't have any earth.
Now, because for me, it's like astrology for dummies 101 over here. What does that mean exactly to have no earth in your chart?
If you have no earth in your chart, obviously you have the whole signs. You have all the signs in your chart. But if you don't have any planets in earth signs or any distinct points in earth signs, then you don't have that modality, or start out that modality, that element. You don't have that element in your chart. And so you don't have that to lean on either.
Hmm.
So like earth is super grounding. Fire is very initiating. It's like passion, right? Water
Okay.
is the element of emotion. It gives us our capacity to be sensitive. And then you've got air, which is the ethers. It's our thought processes, our intellect, right? So it's not graspable so much, right?
Okay.
Unless we talk into Aquarius, in which case, that's a fixed sign. But it's just it's harder for you to get grounded. And that's just a total off point thing, that I just threw in there with
It tracks.
anything else. But anyway, so the whole point of this video really was to, have an astrological talk, but also to speak directly to what she and I are both finishing off right now, which is Neptune square Neptune, right? And Neptune is really beautiful in some ways, really difficult in others. When you get around 37, 38, you start your midlife transits. And these are collective. Everybody goes through these. Nobody's getting out of them. And so when we talk about midlife crisis, it's a real thing. And I've heard people say, oh, do we think millennials are going to have a midlife crisis because we're so different from like the boomers? Of course we will. We just won't
Yeah.
do the same,
Yeah.
because the planets haven't changed. They're still going to come around and be obnoxious, and we get to contend with them, and we get to look at our shadow sides, and we get to, you know what I mean? Like deal and confront parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily want to. And the Neptune square is no exception, right? So Pluto square Pluto, Neptune square Neptune, Uranus opposition. These are the three big ones that we will experience between 37 to 44. And the Neptune square is what finishes off in December, as Neptune will finally station direct and then move on for good. And Neptune is on the higher octave. Neptune represents spirituality, romance, art, um, fantasy. It represents our illusions, right? So like there's a fine line between like fantasy and escapism,
Hmm.
right? On the lower octave, we have delusion, confusion. We have addiction, escapism, right?
Yeah.
So Neptune also represents dreams, whether that's our sleep or daydream. So it's just that whole other ethereal world. And this is why, like, when people get overly invested in romance as a way to decide if a partner is good for them, I caution them, because romance is not real. Romance is like the art that we create, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Photography is another thing that would be considered art, or on the higher octave. But these things are not real. They're momentary and they're great, but they're not sustainable long term because they don't exist in reality, right?
Yeah.
So, so Neptune has, a good flavor, a not so great flavor. People with a lot of Pisces, because Pisces is, the ruler of Neptune. So like these things, these people, if they have a lot of that in their chart, they tend to be prone more often than not to addiction and escapism. I have met like two who are just really on the higher octave, very spiritual, very artistic, But that's a hard transcendence to make in this life. Most people really aren't. They're struggling with the mutability that comes with, I have a kitten now. They're struggling with the mutability, or the thing that we cannot contain or control or hold, that energy of Neptune and Pisces. And this is also an energy where like you make an effort and it falls through because Neptune is fog. So you can't see.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't see. Like a Neptune transit really puts you in a fog. I talked about this in another video, like when Neptune entered the third house of the United States chart, that's when the Smith-Mundt Act was enabled by Obama. He repealed it and then made it legal again for propaganda. And so it like puts you under this veil or this spell of lies and illusion and confusion. And you're just like, what's real?
that seems like a lot of things lately.
Yeah. And so that's like a big part of a Neptune transit is going, what's real? What can I rely on? And Neptune is notorious for like, if you meet someone with Neptune on your Venus, it's like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful or she's so amazing. And then as it moves off, you're like, ooh, I got swindled. You know what I mean?
Veil lifted.
Yeah, or money. Like that could be another thing. Like if it's not a love interest, you can be taken to the bank. So Neptune transits are really, they're not good times to sign contracts, to invest money. They're just not because you end up like missing the fine print.
Uh-oh.
And it's not like, oh, I can overcome this. I'm so much better. It's like everyone just you fall for the spell of Neptune. It's just one of those things.
Oh, and you say, how often does this happen?
Well, it depends on your chart. And so the Neptune square, when Neptune comes around and squares its natal Neptune, that is something that happens to everybody, like I said, between 37, 42, depending
Okay.
on its route. And so it'll revisit and square that natal point. Now, depending on where it is in your chart is where it's going to affect your life. So
Oh,
my natal Neptune is in the sixth house of the day-to-day labors. Um, the part of our life that we rely on to create structure for operations sake, it's job, it's humanitarian work, it's the sixth house can be cooking, it can be small animals, it can be and I lost my boy under this transit, right? Um, and it also represents health. Sixth house is health. Now, in your chart, your natal Neptune actually sits in your second house of money. So you have Neptune transiting your fifth house of creativity and your second house of money. So you've spent the last year and a half going, what creatively can I do to make money? Feeling like there's a tremendous like confusion around that and
yes.
like my efforts aren't manifesting, they're falling through. Just when you think you're kind of making headway, it comes back and starts to hit that point again.
That tracks. That
And
definitely
you
tracks.
just feel lost. Neptune is notorious for making you feel lost. For me, it's sixth house, ninth house. I will say I'd rather have 6 and 9 than 2 and 5, but like it hasn't helped my capacity day to day. Like I just want to sleep 10 hours a night and wake up and be lazy. Like my day to day has just been like,
I mean, that tracks for me as well. It's so funny because my mom said the other day, she's like, all I want to do is sleep. Like, she's like, I'm sleeping like 9 hours a day. Like, I don't know what's going on. And so it makes me wonder, like, I wonder what's going on with her chart then, because she never was like that.
well, and see, Neptune also, when it hits a point on your chart, it'll weaken things because of its fogginess. It has a dissolving quality. So like Neptune, like I got that E. coli thing, right? Like that was so
Yeah.
random. And I didn't have typical symptoms. And yet it was like so hard to diagnose. That's so typical Neptune. Neptune will weaken if it hits your ascendant, which is your physical body, or it hits your sixth house, which is your health. It can weaken you.
Oh.
And so it's not a good time to experiment with your psychedelic drugs. It's not a good time to like try a new health regime because your structure is already being weakened by the very nature of Neptune playing on it. Right? So
I
things
mean, it's so interesting.
you're more prone to disease, you're more prone to parasites, you're more prone to these things because your constitution or your physical body is weakened. And then also like just this treading water. There's like a feeling of treading water with
Yeah,
a Neptune transit.
that's exactly every day you think, okay, let's just get through the day. Like, let's just tread water. Like, let's just keep our head above, just get through it, just get through it. And that seems to be the mantra lately is like, just get through it.
Yeah, so it started for you, it would have started like February, March of 23.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was going on, if I might ask, in like February, March of 23?
I think it was just the beginning of thinking about moving and
Mm,
like the next chapter in life. And like, do I stay? Do I go? If I go, then this, this, and this. And if I stay, it was just like all of a sudden you're just looking at like, it's like being at this crossroads, but it feels like there's like 10 different roads to take. And, you're just trying to like start a business, do this. And then you think like, okay, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Like, it's better to do like one thing well, but I just couldn't do it. It was like I was spreading myself so thin, trying to overanalyze every situation. And it also felt like no matter what way I went, though, it wasn't working. And so then that was just the vibe.
hmm.
Yeah. But it was like the beginning of what's the next step? Something isn't doesn't feel I'm not feeling grounded anymore. That's what it felt like, is like I think that I need to make a change, but I don't know what the change is. And that's probably the worst feeling though, is because I do well with like structure and, tell me what to do and I'll do it. But when you have to make that decision for yourself, it's very difficult.
Well, and the reason that, I even thought about having this conversation with you is because I feel as though we don't give enough credit to the fact that like there are certain personal, even if they are collective, right? It still affects you personally to go through a season like this, where you
It's
can't just bulldoze forward the way you want to and have that structure and have that clarity. You're put under that spell. And the antidote to Neptune is faith. You have no choice but to just be like, I can't see what's in front of me, but I got to walk forward anyway.
that was it. Like I would have the conversation with myself of tomorrow's going to come no matter what. So you can try to figure out a way forward and do something today to hope for clarity tomorrow, but you have to do something. And even if it doesn't work, at least you tried something. And then, it's like Edison with the light bulb, like took 1,000 different times to make it, but like scratched off a list, whatever wasn't working to get to what will work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last Neptune transit I had was just before this. I literally went from like Neptune on my Mercury to the Neptune square. And the Mercury one was interesting. And this is where, because my chart is 70% cardinal and Neptune has been an immutable sign for the last 15 years, I haven't had a good taste of Neptune firsthand until it hit my Mercury. And it was happening at the same time that my Pluto square was happening. So I had this fourth house, seventh house square with Pluto, so family partner. And then at the same time, I had Neptune conjunct my Mercury. And it was bringing up similar issues. So my Mercury is in Pisces, which is not a strong placement for Mercury. So whenever it gets hit by a planet, it tends to be that much more crippling because it's not in a good position. Mercury doesn't like being in Pisces. Um, and so it really magnified because another part of Neptune is idealization. So what do you idealize, right? And so when it hit, it took all my idealizations and just dissolved them. So, I obviously I have so many kitten scratches on my hand. I'm not I'm not married, I don't have children. And I think for a long time, when I was uncomfortable in my life, I just idealized the idea of, well, if I was just married with kids, I wouldn't have this pain. Like this wouldn't be an issue. Like that would be the antidote to this.
Idealization.
And when Neptune hit my Mercury, it magnified it first, it really amplified. And then towards the end, because of Neptune's nature, it has a sobering effect at the end, where whatever you idealized, it's like it takes the rose-colored glasses off, and you're like,
Oh,
this whole time I wanted to buy a house in that neighborhood, and like now you see it in daylight. And you're like,
hmm.
I'm so glad I didn't buy a house in that neighborhood.
Does it ever make you, when that happens and then looking back on it, do you feel like, oh, but why did I think that? And then you sort of start to doubt yourself in your decision making a little bit? Or is it, how do you feel after the fact?
You just get a reality check. You just see the truth. And you're like, and it's not like so Pluto gives painful reality checks. Like Pluto's power struggle. So as it's forcing you to let go of things you're identifying with, it
Mhm.
comes with like, no, I can't lose that part of myself, or I will die. It's kind of that feeling. And you have to just surrender it and trust that what you're giving up is worse than what you're about to get. But it comes with a lot of pain. Neptune transits don't seem to come with a lot of pain. One day you're just like, wow, I can't believe I thought that was an antidote. I am so glad I don't have that on my plate. It doesn't have that pain effect. You're just like, you're just okay.
Okay.
It's like, and there's a little bit of reconciliation or going back and forth bargaining as you're kind of going through it. You're like,
Mm.
well, maybe that's just them. Because what happened for me was all of a sudden, all of my peers were just like ridiculously honest about their lives. And I no longer was like, oh, that's just them. Like in the beginning, it was like, oh, that's just them. Like I would do it differently, right? Because that's what we do. We go into denial and we're like, well, if I'm a mom, it's going to go like this, right? Like you
Yeah.
see people do that. And all of a sudden, it just, I don't know, things just shifted mentally where I was like, that just sounds like a lot of work I don't want to do.
Same.
I just don't want to do it.
Same.
And so there was no pain associated with it. It was like, wow, I just wish I had come to this realization before, but like, okay. And not that I'm even against it. Like, it's not like, oh no, but it's just, I recognize it for the reality that it is, and it's not on a pedestal anymore,
Good.
you know?
Same.
But that's what Neptune does. So I'm kind of curious, like, what is going to, like, what have I been thinking about life that I'm still kind of under that veil that as it moves off December, January, February, like what is going to crystallize for me that I'm just like, why did I see it this way the whole time? You know?
I feel
And
the same way about that particular situation. It's like you always, and you, I never really thought about it because I always thought, oh, it'll come, like when it's right, when it's right. And then you get it to a certain age where you're like, but it's not coming. And so you start to do a lot of introspection of like, I never really felt it, but everybody says, oh, but when it happens, and it's like, but that's a pretty big gamble to take of like, oh, let it happen and then you'll get into it. And it's like, mm,
and I had a guy who is very he wanted to date me and it didn't happen. And he insisted on following me on social media. And then one day he just attacked me. And he was like, well, I don't know what the topic was that I had posted, but he commented about how being a parent is so hard. He has a kid now, and I don't think you could handle it. And I was like, what are you talking about?
oh,
Like, I don't understand where this is coming from.
impressive.
It was a very just projecting moment. I didn't understand. And I was like, he said, is someone as intentional as you to not have these things in your life? And I said, maybe that's the problem. Like most people are so sloppy and how
Yeah.
they create their lives. I'm not. Like I'm not. I'm not sloppy in how I create my life. I don't make decisions arbitrarily.
And
Um,
how did you take that?
well, I ended up having to block him, but you know, it was just like because I'm intentional, somehow that's why I'm missing the boat. Like maybe if we were all intentional, we would all be in a better boat, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but most people just they don't want to do that. They want to live they want to keep their addictions or their poor habits and have
Mhm.
benefits. And
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't work that way. You know, I would love to have an amazing body and eat cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That sounds amazing, you know, and pizza. Yes, that would be awesome. I agree. But like, unfortunately,
Everything is give and take in this world, and that's no exception.
right. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting, you know, comment to be dealing with. But again, like I live intentionally and I'm very curious. Like what was there anything I was idealizing? You know, like will I have that? Because I don't feel like I'm clinging to any ideals during this time. Do you find yourself clinging to
Yeah, I'm trying to think, and I don't think I am either. I think I'm very much just sort of like, okay, let's just see what the day takes us.
do
I've
you
just learned in life that like you have so much control, and you've almost got to learn to like know when to like just step back and live life and let that sort of guide you. Because what I was doing before was like, forcing a lot of things that just I had that gut feeling of like weren't right, but like, oh, but you keep going, but you keep going, you keep going. And then it's like once I just stopped, life got easier. Do you know what I mean? And not that it should always be easy, but with certain, situations, it's like you just got to sort of let it go. And then once I've learned to adapt that mindset, I just sort of stopped putting anything on a pedestal and being like, just get through the day, just see where it takes you, and then figure it out from there.
do you feel like there's anything in terms of like how you make money or how you create where you're just like, if I could just get it to do this, if I could just
Oh,
anything
yeah.
like that, that might be an idealization you're hanging on to.
Yeah, of course. I think, when it comes to work, you think, okay, but if this could just go right, and then it's like, but then the disappointment sets in with certain things. And so I got to go back to that mindset of like, just let it go. But then you feel like you're being lazy. And so it's like a no-win situation.
Hmm.
No-win situation.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, there's just so much laziness that can come up during this transit. I didn't feel the laziness with Neptune on my Mercury. Um, it was very cerebral, the experience. This time I feel it more physiologically, where I'm just like, meh, you know, I just like kind of like whole body just feels blah.
So then maybe that is what I'm going through instead of like going from idealization to like, it is what it is. And
Well,
then,
you know, so I was watching a few other astrologers speak about Neptune and these two women, you know, they're astrologers and they're great. And they were like, yes, Neptune transits can make you feel more spiritual and connected to God. And I was like, I feel like I have lost that relationship completely. Like, I feel like I got no connection to the universe right now. Like, I feel estranged.
it's so funny how it can be so different between two people, like one person saying, "Oh my gosh, it's like accentuating this," and then for you, but it's accentuating it in the opposite direction.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely don't feel connected to anything, you know, universally, spiritually, whatever. I don't feel that at all. I feel very, I feel like I'm on a zodiac in the middle of the ocean, treading water, trying to find land. Like that's what this transit has felt like.
I have when before I moved, and people were like, "But like, what do you think you're going through?" I go, "The only way I can put it is I'm literally in the middle of the ocean, treading water, and like the sun's right above me. So I don't even know what direction is which direction, where land is. And it's like, and I just feel like I just need to move in a direction, but I just didn't know what direction to go into. And so it's like until one day you're just like, I guess I'll just pick this way and then just start swimming. And that's just sort of where I'm at right now is like swimming in that direction. Still haven't hit land, but you almost feel better though, having just made a decision. So it
Mhm.
was like, okay, a big decision was made. Okay, let's just keep going that way until we run into dry land.
Well, I was on a call with because as you know, you're part of my team relaunching my business and taking a radically different approach, a much more expensive approach with it. And I was talking to the consultant that I had hired, and I just was expressing, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm the exception to any rule here when it comes to this process. It just feels like for the last 6 months, a lot of effort has fallen through, and just hoping that like once the fog clears, that everything else kind of lines up too. But it's been a test of my faith to have to go through this and to not have any like real guidance, just this is what it's like to be an entrepreneur too. Like it's there's no like, oh, if you just do it this long, eventually da 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 da. Like
Yeah.
there's none of that. You don't get to decide when things are going to culminate.
And that's what's, I think, so difficult for myself because I've always, especially being in research, where here's your protocol, this is how you do it, this is the results you're going to get, or you should get. And then when you don't get that result, you're like, but I followed the instructions. And it's like,
Exactly.
nope, sometimes you got to get creative and sometimes you have to tweak and do this and this and this. And it's like, but somebody tell me what to do.
Well, and I told him, I was like, look, I am a risk taker by nature. I don't have a problem taking a risk, but I don't want to be wasting resources or energy either.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And so, which he
Right.
obviously agreed with, And I feel like this conversation almost like piggybacks on the one that we had about just feeling that stagnation. Because I don't know that this Neptune transit isn't just that. Like, is that why? Because it just happened to happen post-COVID. It just happened
Very
to land on
true.
us at the wrong time. Is that what we're dealing with?
And it's like, who's to say? And then, yeah, it's like, well, what's next?
So I'm curious. Let's go back and see. Too far. I want to see what life was like for you in Mercury, or sorry, when Neptune was on your Mercury. So we are talking 2018.
Oh, that's the year I got married.
Mm.
Don't know what to say about that.
It's a big decision to make under a Neptune transit, you know what I mean? And then, so did it become clear the decision, what kind of decision it was around 2020?
That's when we, or I believe I was filed for divorce. So there we are.
So tell me more. I mean, did you have going into this, were you just like, yes, this is going to be the thing that I don't
No,
know, like,
it's that whole like hindsight's 2020, right? So you think nobody's perfect, everybody has their faults, and you're of a certain age and you rationalize everything. And so it was like, no, but this is going to be good. No, it's just he's stressed because of work and
mm,
this and this. And and it's so funny because people say the worst that happens is you get a divorce. And I'm like, that's not exactly marriage advice, but okay. And then you can do think like, why not? And so you go through it. And of course I loved him, you know, like all that stuff. I still care about him. That doesn't just go away, but you do see a lot of those red flags, right? But everybody can say that, you know, looking back. And it's funny though, but like once you do get married and that realization of like, there's always a choice, but like it's more of a finite choice. And so it just really brings up a lot more things. And things just change with marriage. It's true. People say like it's different once you're married. It is different once you're married, you
Mhm.
know? And and you just sort of realize one day, okay, I can't live my life like this. I can't the fighting, the stress, it shouldn't be this stressful. It shouldn't be this hard. Like life is hard, relationships are hard, but there's a point where you feel like you're not getting through to somebody at all. And communication is so key. And there was just a complete lack of it, where you feel like you're calm in like what you're saying and you're trying to get your point across, and it just feels like it's not getting across. And what do you do at that point when you just feel like somebody's not putting in the equal amount of effort, you
Yeah.
know? And it just one day it just takes to getting to that point and you're just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so you just choose to not do it. And it's one of the hardest decisions you'll ever have to make is to say when is when. And you just get pushed to a point where you do make that decision and it's like, okay, no going back. It was difficult. It was a huge, you know, blow up argument where you just realize I can't live my life like this anymore. This isn't living life. And yeah, that's it.
Was there like how would you characterize it mentally? Was it confusing? Did you feel like you were in a fog?
Draining. Draining. I felt like every day was draining. Just not being able to communicate with somebody, but having to share a home with somebody. It was just draining. You know, the worrying, the how we're going to get through this, how like what's going to happen with this, what's going to happen, like what kind of mood are they going to be in when they get home? And, you know, that kind of dictates how the night's going to go.
Mhm.
And it's draining. Like I was always running on this high anxiety. And I actually can like take a lot of things. You know what I mean? I can just go with the flow. I can get through a lot of situations. It just came to a point where you're just like, I have nothing left to give. Like it's been drained out of me and I have nothing left. Nothing left.
How long
And
did you
so
guys date before you got married?
2.5 years. You know, so it's like when you're older, you feel like that's long enough. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, 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 for sure.
and so a lot of good times, but then you look back and you're like, oh, but he traveled most of the relationship. So it's like, you know, that kind of stuff happened. And really, like, you know, shit hit the fan when like COVID happened, because then you're like forced to be in close quarters with somebody. And if you don't already have good communication skills, and then you go through that, you really see things for what they are.
Yeah, so Mercury is the mind, it's communication, it's the interface by which we deal with reality, right? And so that gets challenged under any transit, but like you're gonna change some aspect of your mind when you have an outer planet like Neptune hit it like that. Like some aspect of how you deal with reality, how you interface is gonna be shifting.
It came down to like when you have the hard conversation with yourself, you think, this can't be my life for the rest of my life. Like, I need more and I deserve more. You know, like I know that gets thrown around a lot of people saying, I deserve more. I deserve. It's like, I respect myself more than this. That's what it came down to. And so, therefore, I deserve somebody who wants to communicate, you know, not that you're like begging them to communicate. You know, you just think that I don't want the moon. I just want like an even playing field. is what it felt like. And when you just feel like it's not there, it's what else can you do? You think I'm stronger than this to be led to believe that like this is the best I can get.
It's interesting too, like you brought up, like when people say I deserve, it's like I've become really mindful of such language because that leaves you on a spectrum that's built on defense mechanisms.
Yeah.
Deserve or don't deserve. It's like, how dare you? I deserve, and it puts you back
Hmm.
in that defensive place where it's like instead of looking at our circumstances and what's happening and being like, I just don't want to engage this.
Hmm.
It's not about me, but I just don't want to engage it. Like it's just not what I want to participate in.
Exactly. It's like I don't want to say I deserve. It's like, no, really at the end of the day, I need to respect myself enough to say, you know what, this doesn't make me feel good. And I want something that makes me feel good. You're not giving me something that feels good. So therefore, so on and so on. And it's like, I know it's not as simple as that with a marriage, but communication is pretty simple. And every person should be able to ask for that and to receive it and to give it. So that's my take on it. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, undergoing those kind of transits, they do change you. So you were brought face to face with the reality of what happens when you can't interface with someone.
And it's so true. Like you think, when you're younger and everybody says communication is key, communication is key. It's always like, okay, 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 until you don't have communication. And then you're like, oh, communication is key.
Right, because it helps to create that connection that we're seeking. Or if we don't get it, then it just makes that wall that much bigger.
Hey, and the wall just grew and grew and grew until you just feel like that's why I understand when people say that obviously this is debatable, but emotional affairs are almost harder than physical affairs. I get why people feel that way because if you all you want is communication with your partner and you feel like maybe your partner is communicating better with somebody else, you know what I mean, and having conversations that you feel like not bad conversations, but you think why can't they be that open with me? So like I can see where people, and this is not me accusing my ex of
Right, right, right.
any sort of affair, but just looking at it, other partners and just the communication aspect. I can understand why people feel like I just want that emotional connection and that comes with being vulnerable and talking and talking about the hardest parts of yourselves. Like that's a connection. That's true. And so for anybody out there who's ever experienced your partner having that with somebody else, you think like, oh, that's more hurtful than anybody can get drunk and make a stupid mistake. But like to have a heartfelt conversation with a different person, that feels difficult for me personally.
Yeah, no, I could totally understand that because they are, but at the same time, like they're also typically using that individual as a distraction.
Absolutely. Like
It's
you can
it's
see, yeah, that it's like, oh, you also just wanted somebody, like in a way, kind of narcissistic, right? Of like, oh, you just wanted somebody that wanted to listen to everything you had to say and just go along with it as well. So it's just interesting all the things that are tied to communication.
well, and it's hard too. It's like you can only just like show up and say, "Hey, I need to be heard," before like the frustration kicks in, which causes the
Mhm.
conflict. And it's just, that inability, if someone can't be vulnerable with you, they're not being vulnerable with someone else. Like I know it looks like it on the outside, but
Yeah.
like they don't become vulnerable with somebody else. That person just becomes their crutch for the night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like um people who have affairs, for example, um, the affair partner is the fantasy.
And
You
then
don't
it's like,
bring reality to the affair partner, which is why the person at home is like so bitter and enraged because all they see is the fantasy part and they think they put it on a pedestal, they idealize it like, oh, it
Uh-huh.
must be so great. But no, that person plays a very specific role. If that
Very.
person, the second that person tries to become reality, the one having the affair is like, we're done. Because the affair partner plays a very specific role. You are my drug. You are my escape from this over here.
Escape,
Don't change
exactly.
that. You are not my reality. You are not the person I have to pay bills with or deal with these contracts with or deal with any of the children. Like that is not your role. Your role is to make me forget about all of that.
Escapism.
Yeah. And so when people come to me, clients are like, oh, but they're cheating and I just don't know why I wasn't good enough. I'm like, you weren't, you played a very different role than the affair person. The affair person will never have the reality of this individual.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I mean?
That's why it's always
Even if
interesting.
even if a
No,
man,
no.
wife or somebody else, trust me, he'll keep doing that.
And it's like, and I'm a huge believer in, kind of like how you start a relationship is how it ends. So if you're having an affair with somebody and then you get together, do you really think that person's going to be faithful to you? Do you think you're the one that changed them and that it's not this? I mean,
And
that's why,
like that is such a Neptunian type of thought process too. Like that is such delusion.
like, oh, you're the one to change them.
Yeah,
You're the one
like,
to
oh,
change them.
that I could be somehow so majestical that I could actually shift this person. No, people are who they are.
It's so true. And
People
they
are
tell
who they
you
are.
who they are. They
Yeah.
show you who they are. And it's up to the individual to accept it or fantasize, idealize it.
Hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, it's yeah, anyway, Neptune is definitely one of those energies that will just play right into that behavior. I had a client who met a guy when she had Neptune on her Venus, and I didn't want to tell her. She was like, it's amazing. And I was like,
I'll give it some time. You're like, give it 6 months and 3 days.
I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it is. Interestingly enough, she knew she was not in a good place, and even though she had paid a very large amount to work with me, she was like, no, it's fine. My life is perfect as it is, and I don't need any more work. And I was like, okay, take care. Like she knew that if I continued to talk to her, I would burst that bubble.
Did she ever
And
come back to you?
no, she ended up completely just, well, I don't know if she blocked me on social media or got off social media. I can't find her now. She was from Europe. But but yeah, she was just like, everything is great and we're gonna get pregnant and have this baby. And I was like, I would love to know what's going on with her these days. I would love to know what happened with him because I met him. I went and visited and I met him and I was like, okay, this will be
You
interesting.
must have
But
known immediately.
yeah, no, like I could just tell, you know. But like I said, Neptune was on her Venus, and I was like, okay, like that is the worst time to make an investment decision or to make a relationship decision is when Neptune's on your Venus. Don't do it. Don't do it. Love and money, don't do it. Um, so now, if you've already established the relationship and Neptune comes in on your Venus, that's different.
Yeah.
That's different. I'm talking you meet someone during the transit, right?
Yeah.
You know, or you make the investment, you know, during the transit. Like, but if it predates that, then no, it's not the same thing. But whoa, Neptune can just create such a veil. And what's funny, Katie, is Neptune, after it leaves my square here, it's gonna
Mhm.
go right on to my midheaven, which is the career point of my chart. And I'm just hoping that it brings a lot of dissolving of kind of the old, um, like the way that the world has known me. Like I'm hoping that I can kind of dissolve and shift that energy.
Oh, I hope that for you.
And then you know that it can be like a spiritual. I don't know what it's going to bring. I have no clue. I am just hoping. Thankfully, Saturn will be there at the exact same time. They both cross over at the same time, and Saturn is definitely no nonsense and is the opposite. It's all structure and hard work and clarity, and it's all those things, right? So hopefully,
Oh,
it
can
will
I
be.
get some of that?
Yeah, no, right? Like Saturn is actually on your Mercury right now.
Oh,
Yeah, Saturn, I looked at your chart and Saturn is on your Mercury at this moment. It just went direct 13 degrees, but it's been stationed and sitting on your Mercury. So it's really putting pressure on your mindset.
ooh,
Yeah, it's definitely forcing some mental stuff on you right now and has been.
okay.
Do you feel any of that? Do you feel
It,
pressure?
yes.
Okay, Saturn is pressure.
It, like an elephant on your chest pressure.
Yeah, Saturn is pressure. Saturn puts pressure on things to reveal the weak points, the weaknesses.
Mm.
So you're like, that has to go or that needs to change. And the thing with Saturn that makes it kind of annoying is that when Saturn makes an aspect, even if you're a go-getter, like not a problem. I will just use the tools I've always used. The caveat or the whatever is that with Saturn, you have to learn a new way. So not only do you have to improve it and fix it and change it, but you have to do it in a new way, a different way.
Oof.
So
Which is
old,
hard when you have set patterns, and
yeah.
it's like,
And Saturn will reward you like 100%. Saturn will be like, you figured it out. Great. Here is your reward. But in the meantime, it's just a lot of pressure to get it right. And so, but it's moving on. So is there anything that has kind of crystallized as far as taking action mentally for you recently?
um, honestly, I feel like this relationship, like this has maybe Saturn gave me you. Um,
I would be surprised. No.
like it just to give direction.
Mhm.
Like you've been sort of like a North Star. So that's that's been good. And it's the first time though in a long time that I have felt more direction. So I can say with certainty that like yes, this has given me direction.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, you people can play the parts of the planet sometimes. Like absolutely.
So you're a planet page.
I mean, depending on how things kind of manifest in your life,
Mhm.
like if you, let's say you had Pluto on your Venus, right? Now that's another transit that you should not get hooked up with anybody because that's actually known as the fatal attraction transit.
Well, it's
Um,
been a few years, so it's not probably not going to happen now. So
so let's see, your Venus is, let's see, that's the transit. Let me look at your birth chart. Your Venus is, oh, you just had it actually. I'm probably going through your divorce actually. So it was 2021 to 2022, 2020 to 2022.
okay, that's when like the divorce was like,
Yep, power struggles.
oh, it was a yes.
Yeah, power
Yeah,
struggles.
it
Yeah.
was. Oh, wait, let me think. No, 2021, 22. That was the height.
Yeah.
Like that was definitely like the climax of everything. And then I think after like July of 2022 is when it really started to like, okay, next step. But for sure it was like the height of everything. And anybody who's been through a divorce understands, even if it's amicable, which
Oh,
it
I've seen it. Yeah.
and it was like no children, so there wasn't like any nastiness to it. But no matter what, it's like it's a difficult process, and it peaks, and that's when it peaked. 100%, that's when it peaked.
That's interesting. Yeah, because your Venus is in Aries at 26 degrees, and that's when Pluto was at 26 of Capricorn. So it was squaring and it was causing that fatal attraction aspect. You don't want to meet someone. So just so you know, I always point this out. So Meghan Markle and Prince Harry met under that transit for him. And I don't know. I think she's just a total narc. But anyway, so yeah, like you don't want to meet someone under that transit because it's a power struggle and it is fatal attraction. Like you are so obsessed with this person and they just come in and they annihilate you, but you're obsessed with them. So, but like that's I forgot the point I was trying to make initially, but anyway, that's another transit you don't want to you want to watch out for.
When is my next love transit?
Your next love transit, it's hard to predict those things. I mean, I'd have to spend a little bit more time studying your chart. I would want to see because a lot of times like I use your past to predict your future. So whatever brought
Got it.
in certain aspects prior, I'd want to see because that's the energy that you relate to bring in those things. And I'd be curious, but we'd have to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, in theory, anytime that can come in, but I'd have to spend more time sitting with it. But but yeah, these transits can be quite interesting, and I'm really glad that Neptune is finally moving off, and maybe the stagnation will go with it.
Let's just, hope for change. We already got a big change, which was good, but hopefully our personal change would be even better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I love astrology. I love that it really kind of gives me a heads up of what's going on.
I enjoy it, and I've always wanted to learn more about it, but I always enjoy when people like read my chart or read my palm, like anything like that. I'm like, I always find it like, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one, let's see, Uranus opposition. Let's see, I think your Uranus is before mine. So you might have that this year. Let's see, your Uranus is, yeah, you're gonna have the Uranus opposition, um, like we're in 20 to 25.
Hmm.
So 43, you'll have your Uranus opposition. Um, and I like that because that's actually second house, eighth house. So that's your money, other people's money, values, contracts. It's so that could bring in like a big windfall for you that could change kind of that relationship to how money comes in for you.
That would be nice.
43, yeah. And then
That's welcomed.
for sure. So I'll be 44 when it happens for me because like I said, I was born 2 months before you, so it had retrograded by the
Got
time I
it.
was born. But but anyway, yeah, it's always fun having these discussions with you, Katie, and just kind of sharing insight for other people so that they can get an understanding of the world. And if you're between 37 and 44, like what's going on, like these are some of the things that are happening. So,
Where I'm here for it.
mhm.
Open to
Yeah,
all things.
absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, whoever has shown up to listen, and we will see you next week then. Bye.